My son's hand was sticky with cotton candy when she said she had to leave. Emergency at work, Liam. I'm so sorry. Nicole kissed Robert on the top of his head, barely even glancing at me, her phone already pressed to her ear as she walked backward toward the zoo exit. You two have fun. I'll explain later. Robert was 4 years old. He had been talking about this zoo trip for 2 solid weeks straight. He had made me draw every single animal he wanted to see on a piece of paper. Giraffes, elephants, the big cats. And he'd slept with that crumpled drawing under his pillow every night. Nicole knew this. She had been right there when he drew it. Mommy has to go, Robert asked, watching her disappear through the gate. She'll be back, buddy. I said it automatically, the way you do when you're trying to protect your kid from something you don't fully understand yet. We kept walking. We saw the giraffes. We saw the elephants. Robert pressed his face against every single glass panel and screamed with pure joy at the tigers. And I was there for all of it, taking photos on my phone, buying him a stuffed penguin from the gift shop, lifting him onto my shoulder so he could see over the crowd at the sea lion show. And the whole time, in the very back of my skull, something was wrong. I could feel it the way you feel a change in weather before the clouds even show up, before the temperature drops. Just a pressure shift in the air around you. Nicole worked as a marketing coordinator for a mid-sized logistics company. I knew her job inside and out. I had heard every single complaint about her boss, every story about the quarterly reports, every frustration about the office politics. She had never, not once in 3 years of marriage, been called away on a weekend emergency. Her company barely functioned on weekdays without a full-blown crisis. While Robert napped against my shoulder in the stroller near the aviary, I opened the family location app on my phone. We had set it up when Robert was born. One of those practical parenting decisions that neither of us thought much about at the time. It just sat there on my phone, quietly tracking. I opened it. I looked at Nicole's Blued. It was not at her office building downtown. It was not moving toward any office building. It was sitting perfectly still at an address I did not recognize in the Riverside district, 3 miles from the zoo. Not moving at all. I typed the address into a Maps search. A residential building came up. An apartment complex called the Meridian. I sat on that bench with my sleeping son in the stroller, and I felt the ground shift completely under my feet without moving an inch. I took a breath. Then another. I told myself there was an explanation. Maybe she was meeting a colleague there. Maybe there was a perfectly reasonable reason. I made myself genuinely believe it for about 45 seconds, which was as long as I could hold that particular lie together before it collapsed in on itself. Because I knew that address. Not consciously, not right away. But when I searched the name of the building and then searched it alongside a name that had surfaced twice in old arguments, Derek Calloway, her ex from before we met, the one she had dated for 2 years and always insisted meant absolutely nothing to her. When I searched those two things together, I found a LinkedIn profile with a work address listed as the Meridian on Riverside. He lived there. Nicole's Blued. I was sitting inside Derek Calloway's apartment on a Saturday afternoon while our 4-year-old son napped in a zoo stroller, and I held his cotton candy penguin in my lap. I didn't cry. I want to be completely clear about that. I am not the kind of man who crumbles on a bench in public while his kid is sleeping 2 feet away. I sat there, and I breathed, and I felt something in my chest go very cold and very quiet, like a furnace clicking off. That cold thing was not grief yet. Grief would come later, in private, at the right time. What I felt right then was clarity. Absolute, surgical clarity. I took a screenshot of the location app with the timestamp. I saved it. I screenshot it again 10 minutes later when the dot still had not moved. Again 20 minutes after that. I built a small, quiet file of evidence while my son slept and birds called to each other somewhere behind the aviary fence. The 3 of us had met at a work event years before Robert was born. Nicole was sharp, beautiful, funny in that quick, cutting way that made you feel like you genuinely won something when she laughed at your joke. I fell hard and fast. Proposed after 18 months. We got married in the backyard of my parents' house in September, and Robert came 11 months later, and I thought we had built something completely real. I thought I had done everything right. I had worked hard, made a good home, been present, been faithful, been the kind of husband and father that men are supposed to be and very often aren't. I changed diapers at 3 in the morning without being asked. I cooked dinner 4 nights a week. I supported her fully when she wanted to go back to part-time, so she could take an online course. I had never once, not for a single moment, looked at another woman, and thought about what it might be like. I had trusted her completely. That's the part that sits like broken glass in your throat. Not the betrayal itself, but the trust you gave so freely. The way you offered it without any armor at all, because you genuinely believed it was safe to do so. Robert woke up and asked for a snack, and I bought him pretzels, and we watched the flamingos for a while. He told me very seriously that flamingos were actually pink because they ate shrimp, and he'd learned this from a nature video. And could we please get shrimp for dinner, because he wanted to see if he would turn pink too. I told him that was an absolutely outstanding scientific experiment, and we would investigate. He laughed and grabbed my hand, and we walked toward the exit together, and I held it together with both fists the entire way to the car. She was home when we got back, sitting on the couch with her shoes off, phone face down on the cushion beside her, looking composed and slightly tired in the way people look when they're performing a tiredness they don't actually feel. "How was the rest of the trip?" she asked. "Great," I said. "We learned that flamingos eat shrimp." "Mommy, I want to eat shrimp, so I turn pink," Robert announced, running straight past her toward the kitchen. She laughed. A real laugh, easy and warm. And I watched her laugh, and I thought, "You were in that man's apartment 2.5 hours ago. You came home and took your shoes off, and you are laughing like everything is completely normal. Work emergency sorted out?" I asked. "Yeah, it was a mess with one of the vendor contracts. Had to get it handled." She picked up her phone, scrolled something, set it back down. "Took longer than I thought." "Which vendor?" A half-second pause. "Micro. Small. If I hadn't been specifically watching for it, I would have missed it completely. Apex Logistics. They've been a nightmare lately." I nodded. I went to the kitchen and I made Robert shrimp pasta for dinner. And I was completely calm the entire time. And I told myself that tonight was not the night. Not in front of Robert. Not without having absolutely everything I needed first. I waited 3 days. I used those 3 days the way a man is genuinely supposed to use them. Not to spiral, not to break things, not to send accusatory texts at midnight. I used them to be thorough. I called in a favor from my friend Jason, who works in IT security and owed me more than one solid. And I asked him how one would go about verifying that a particular person's phone had been in a particular location on a particular day. He asked me if this was personal. I said yes. He didn't ask anything else after that. What he came back with, combined with the screenshots I already had, was airtight. The blue dot, the timestamps, a record showing her phone had connected to a Wi-Fi network registered to AD Callaway at the Meridian at 1:47 p.m. and disconnected at 4:22 p.m. 2 hours and 35 minutes. I also went through our shared credit card statement. A restaurant charge I hadn't thought about before. A lunch place downtown on a Tuesday when she told me she ate at her desk. A parking garage charge near Riverside on a Thursday afternoon when she said she stayed late at the office. Small things. The kind you don't notice when you're not looking and absolutely cannot unsee once you are. On the 4th day, I arranged for my mother to take Robert for the night. I told her I needed to talk to Nicole privately about some things. My mother is not a woman who needs anything explained to her twice. She showed up, took Robert for pizza and a sleepover, and by 6 the house was completely quiet. Nicole came home at 6:15. She called out hello and set her bag down and went to the kitchen to pour a glass of water. I was already sitting at the dining room table with my phone on the table and a printed copy of the credit card statements right beside it. "Where's Robert?" she asked. "With my mom," I said. "Sit down, Nicole." She heard something in my voice. I watched her clock it immediately. A slight hesitation. A full reassessment happening behind her eyes. She sat down. "I want to ask you something," I said. "And I need you to think very carefully before you answer, because I already know the truth, and what happens next depends entirely on whether you respect me enough to tell it yourself." She opened her mouth. "Where were you on Saturday between 1:47 and 4:22 p.m.? And don't tell me the Apex Logistics vendor story again, because I've already heard that one." The color left her face in a way that was almost clinical to watch. "Liam, I have your location data," I said, setting the phone in front of her with the screenshot pulled up. "I have the Wi-Fi connection log from Derek Callaway's apartment. I have these." I slid the credit card statements across the table. "The Tuesday lunch. The Thursday parking charge in Riverside. I have all of it." I looked at her steadily. "So let me ask you one more time, and let's make this worth both of our time. How long has this been going on?" She stared at the phone. Then she looked at me, and her eyes filled, and I felt absolutely nothing. "Liam, Please let me explain. How long? It wasn't supposed to. Nicole. My voice was low and completely flat. How long? She pressed her hands flat on the table. Her rings caught the light. For months. For months. Robert had just turned 4. She had been doing this for the entirety of our son's 4th year of life. How many times? She looked away. How many times? I don't know, Liam. I lost count. She said it quietly, and not cruelly, but it landed like a brick through a window regardless. I'm so sorry. I know that doesn't. I know it means nothing right now. But I am. Does he know you're married? Does he know about Robert? Yes. And he didn't care. He said that was my problem to figure out. She stopped, started again. A real stand-up guy, Derek Calloway. I let the silence sit for a moment. Then I said, did you love him? She didn't answer immediately. And that was an answer. You left our son at the zoo, I said. You looked at a 4-year-old boy who had been talking about that trip for 2 weeks, and you kissed him on the head, and you walked out to go to that man's apartment. He asked me if you were coming back. He asked it twice. He fell asleep on my shoulder, holding a stuffed penguin. And when he woke up, the very first thing he did was look for you. I leaned forward slightly. I need you to understand that I am not angry about what you did to me. I am finished with what you did to him. She was genuinely crying now. Not performance crying. Really crying. And I pushed the box of tissues across the table because I am not a man who makes anyone sit in their own tears. Even someone who has completely earned them. I want you to tell me the full truth, I said. Not because I'm going to forgive it or use it to feel better. Because I need to know exactly what I'm divorcing. It came out in pieces over the next 40 minutes. She had met Derek at a professional event. He had reached out first. It started as coffee, then texts, then a lunch she told herself was totally innocent. She knew somewhere around the 3rd week that it absolutely was not innocent, and she had made the conscious choice to keep going anyway. She told herself it was because she felt disconnected from me, that I worked too much, that she felt lonely. I listened to every single excuse with complete attention, and I rejected each one with the same quiet, total clarity. I work hard for this family, I said. I have never once made you feel unloved intentionally. I have never been cruel to you, never been absent when it counted, never given you a single reason to feel alone that you couldn't have brought to me and said, Liam, I need more from you. You had every opportunity to have that exact conversation. You chose this instead. I know, she whispered. Then don't explain it to me with loneliness. That's not what this is. This is a choice you made every single day for 4 months. And you remade it every single time you had the chance to stop. She tried at one point to suggest we could work through it. Counseling, time. She would end it immediately and completely. No contact. I looked at her steadily. Nicole, I'm going to say this once and I need you to hear it clearly so we don't ever have to revisit it. This marriage is over. It was over the moment you chose to leave our son at a zoo to go to that man's apartment. Not because I'm too proud to try, but because I know exactly what I deserve. And I know exactly what Robert deserves. And neither of us deserve someone who is capable of doing what you did on Saturday. Do you understand me? She nodded. She was crying so hard she could not speak. Good, I said. Now I need you to go stay somewhere else tonight. Your mother's, a hotel, I don't care. I'll have your essentials packed in an hour. We'll work out the formal arrangements through attorneys. Liam, please. I'm not angry, I said, standing. I'm not going to make this ugly, and I am not going to drag Robert through a war. But I am done, and I need you out of this house tonight, so I can go get my son from my mother's and hold it together for him in the morning. She left by 9. I sat in the quiet house for about 20 minutes alone, and I let the grief come. Because it was real, and it was mine, and I was absolutely allowed to feel it. I thought about the wedding. I thought about the night Robert was born and the way Nicole had looked holding him for the very first time. How completely certain I had been in that moment that everything in my life had arrived at exactly the right place. I thought about all of it, and I genuinely grieved it. And then I got up, washed my face, and started making a list. Because grief is real and it has its place, but so does consequence. My first call the next morning was to a divorce attorney named Patricia Hoadam, who had been recommended by a colleague and who came with a reputation for being methodical and completely unsentimental. I met with her on Monday. I brought everything. The screenshots, the logs, the credit card statements, the full documented timeline Jason had helped me put together. Patricia looked through it with the expression of someone reading a grocery list. Grounds are clear, she said. Do you have any concern about her making claims about your fitness as a parent? I told her none whatsoever. Good, she said. Then we move. Papers were filed by Thursday. My second call was to Nicole's mother, Linda. I genuinely liked Linda. She was a decent woman who had always treated me well, and she deserved to hear what had happened directly from me rather than from some distorted version of events. I called her and told her calmly and factually what had occurred. I told her I had no intention of using this to damage her relationship with Robert, but that she should know the truth. Linda was silent for a long moment, and then said, "Liam, I am so sorry. That girl was raised better than this. It was a small thing. It helped more than I expected. My third move was considerably more deliberate. Derek Calloway was not merely an affair partner. He was the man who had actively encouraged a married mother to walk away from her child at a zoo for an afternoon of entertainment. He deserved to experience some real professional turbulence. I knew through my own professional network, having worked in corporate operations for 11 years, that Derek was in commercial real estate and had recently been pursuing a significant leasing contract with a downtown development firm whose senior partner, Arthur Good, was a member of the same industry association I sat on the advisory board for. I did not lie. I did not fabricate a single thing. I simply made a call to Arthur, mentioned that I had come to know Derek Calloway through personal circumstances, and that I had some serious concerns about his character and discretion that I thought Arthur might want to be aware of before formalizing any contractual relationship. I offered to share documentation if Arthur found it relevant. Arthur called back 2 days later. The contract, he said, was going in a different direction. Derek Calloway lost a six-figure deal because he chose to sleep with another man's wife while knowing exactly who she was and precisely what she was leaving to come see him. I felt entirely at peace about that. Nicole's professional life took its own hit, not from anything I directly engineered, but from the simple weight of what she had done to her own stability. She had to move back in with Linda initially, which meant a longer commute to her job, which began affecting her punctuality and overall performance. I was told this by mutual acquaintances. I had not asked. It was simply information that arrived, the way information always does when a community becomes aware of what someone has genuinely done. What I did engineer was the social reality of our immediate circle. We had shared friends, couples we'd had over for dinner, a weekend hiking group, people who knew us as a complete unit. I did not make any speeches. I did not post anything publicly. I simply told the truth when asked, clearly and without embellishment, and I let people draw their own conclusions. Most of them did so very quickly. Invitations that had previously included Nicole as a given began arriving addressed only to me. The community reorganized itself around the truth, as communities generally do when the truth is clear and well documented. Robert was the compass for absolutely everything I did. Every single decision I made during those weeks, I made it by putting him at the center first. His routine stayed completely intact. His school pickup happened at the same time every day. His weekends were structured and fun and predictable. I took him to the park and to his swimming lessons and to his friend Caleb's birthday party. I answered his questions about where Mommy was living now with age-appropriate honesty and complete steadiness, because children don't need to be shielded from all hard things. They need to be guided through them by someone who isn't shaking. One night about 3 weeks after Nicole left, Robert was sitting on his bed after his bath, and he looked up at me with his still damp hair and his penguin tucked under his arm, and he said, "Daddy, does Mommy not love us anymore?" I sat down right beside him on the bed. I took a breath. "Mommy loves you," I said. "She loves you very much, buddy. What happened between me and Mommy is a grown-up problem that has absolutely nothing to do with how much she loves you. You understand. But she left at the zoo," he said, with the devastating precision of a 4-year-old. "She did," I said, "and that was a mistake. Grown-ups make mistakes too. What I know for absolutely sure is that you are the most important thing in the world to me, and nothing is ever going to change that. Not ever." "Okay." He leaned against my arm. "Okay, Daddy. And buddy, you can ask me anything. Always. No question is too big." He considered this with great seriousness. "Can we get a dog?" I laughed. Full, real, straight from the chest. "That," I said, "is a very serious maybe." He grinned, and I held him. And I made a promise to myself right there that this child was going to look back on his childhood and know without any doubt that at least one of his parents had shown up for him completely every single time. I threw myself into the other parts of my life with the focused energy of a man who has removed a weight he didn't even fully realize he was carrying. I had been passed over for a senior operations director role at my company 8 months earlier, and I had accepted it without pushing back nearly as hard as I should have. Now, with no household tension draining me daily and no emotional fog to constantly navigate, I requested a meeting with my division VP and made a case for myself that was direct, data-backed, and completely unambiguous. I had the numbers. I had the project record. I told him plainly, been underutilized, and I intended to correct that going forward. He offered me the director title 3 weeks later with a salary increase that significantly changed my entire financial picture. I bought a house. Not immediately, but when the divorce was finalized with a custody arrangement that gave Robert primary residency with me and regular time with Nicole, I used the settlement proceeds plus my improved income to put a down payment on a 4-bedroom house in a good school district with a yard large enough to genuinely require a dog. I bought one. A golden retriever that Robert named Captain with the solemn authority of a boy who truly understood the weight of naming things. Captain was immediately and completely devoted to Robert in the absolute and uncomplicated way that dogs commit to their people. Watching the two of them tear around the backyard in the afternoons became the absolute best part of my entire day. I started running again. I had run through my 20s and stopped when life got busy with marriage and a newborn, the way you stop things when other things crowd in. Now I got up at 5:30 every morning before Robert woke up and ran 4 miles. After 3 months, I felt better in my body than I had in years. I signed up for a half marathon and trained for it with the same methodical commitment I brought to everything else. And I ran it on a cold November morning and finished in a time I was genuinely proud of. The woman I met was not part of any plan. Her name was Claire, and she was a pediatric occupational therapist who volunteered at Robert's school's special needs support program. I met her at a school fundraiser standing in line for coffee, and she made a dry comment about the quality of the donated baked goods that made me laugh so unexpectedly that I nearly spilled my cup. We talked for 40 minutes beside the coffee table, and I went home and thought about her for 3 days before I did anything about it. I took it slow. That was completely non-negotiable. I had a son to consider and a recent wound to genuinely respect. And Claire, to her enormous credit, understood both without me having to explain them at length. She was unhurried. She was steady. She was someone who actually listened when you talked and genuinely remembered what you said. And she was good with Robert in a way that was completely natural and unforced, which mattered more than absolutely anything else on earth. Robert told me about 4 months after he met her that he thought Claire was really nice, and also she let him pick the movie. I considered this a highly significant endorsement from the most important critic in my life. I was not looking for Nicole's ghost. I was not trying to fill a space. I was simply carefully finding out what it actually felt like to be with someone who was genuinely who they said they were. I heard about Derek Calloway occasionally through the industry grapevine. The deal he had lost had apparently been a significant one, and losing it had cost him real standing in his firm. There were other whispers that Nicole's departure from his life, which happened when she realized he had absolutely no intention of building anything serious with her, had not been clean or graceful. That he had, in the way of men who pursue married women and then get bored, moved on before she was ready to be moved on from. That she had come to understand too late what she had actually given up versus what she had imagined she was getting. I didn't track any of this obsessively. It simply existed in the background, the way consequences exist. Not because I placed them there, but because actions produce them naturally and on their own schedule. It was over a year after the zoo when I saw her. I was at the farmer's market on a Saturday morning. Robert was at my mother's for the weekend, and I was getting vegetables and coffee and genuinely enjoying the particular quiet pleasure of walking through an outdoor market in good weather with nowhere specific to be. I had put on real muscle from the running and the gym work. I was wearing a jacket I liked. I had gotten a solid night's sleep. And I was, in the simple and uncomplicated way I had worked very hard to rebuild, genuinely content. She was near the flower stall. I recognized the posture before I fully recognized the face, the way she stood, the familiar tilt of her head. She looked thinner than I remembered, shadows under her eyes that were visible even from 20 feet. Her hair was pulled back in a way that looked functional rather than intentional. She was wearing a coat I didn't recognize, something purchased after she moved out, and it wasn't quite the right size. She saw me at the exact same moment I saw her. We both stopped. I walked toward her, because I am not a man who avoids things. Liam. Her voice was different. Quieter. Something had completely gone out of it. Nicole. You look. She stopped, started again. You look really well. I am, I said simply. She glanced around the market, an old nervous habit of hers. Is Robert? He's with my mother. He's great. He's thriving. She nodded. Her eyes filled in a way she didn't even bother trying to hide anymore, which was genuinely different from before. Before, she had carefully managed her emotions for effect. This was something else entirely. I think about the zoo every day, she said. I want you to know that. What I did. I think about it every single day. I believe you, I said. I am so sorry, Liam. For everything. For what I did to you and to him, and to what we had. I was stupid and selfish, and I threw away something real for something that was. She pressed her lips together. He didn't care about me. He never did. I think some part of me knew that, and I did it anyway. I know, I said. Is there any? She stopped herself. She looked at me, and then she looked away. No. I know the answer to that. You do, I said. Without any cruelty. That door closed a long time ago. But I need you to hear something. Nicole, and I need you to take it seriously. I waited until she was looking directly at me. Robert needs his mother to be stable and present and consistent. Whatever you're going through, you work it out and you show up for him. That's all I ask of you. Not for me. For him. I'm trying, she said. I'm in therapy. I'm working on it. Good. Then keep working. She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw in her face the full weight of what she had actually lost. Not the version she had imagined when she was sitting in Derek's apartment telling herself she deserved something better, but the real version. Standing right in front of her at a Saturday farmer's market. Solid and completely self-possessed and entirely beyond her reach. I know you won't believe this, she said quietly. But you were the best thing that ever happened to me. Then you should have acted like it, I said. Without cruelty. Just plainly. The way true things are said. Then I picked up my coffee from the market counter and I walked to the vegetable stall and I bought tomatoes and herbs and a bunch of sunflowers because Robert had asked me to bring home flowers so we could put them in the kitchen. I walked to my car in the bright morning air and I did not look back. I thought about her for maybe 30 seconds on the drive home. Not with anger. Not with sadness. Just a brief, clean acknowledgement that a chapter had ended and the ending was final, and I was genuinely glad of it. Then I thought about what I would cook for dinner when Robert got home the next day, and whether Captain had behaved himself with the neighbor's cat, and whether Claire might want to come over next weekend to watch the playoff game. All of those things were more interesting and more real than anything I had left behind at that flower stall. Robert is nearly 6 now. He's in kindergarten, and his teacher says he is one of the most emotionally mature kids in his entire class, which I will quietly take at least partial credit for. He is completely obsessed with dinosaurs and ocean creatures and Captain, and he is increasingly learning to code on a kid's app one installed on his tablet. He is funny and warm and absolutely certain of his place in the world, which is the most important thing I know how to give any child. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Nicole had stabilized considerably. A new therapist, a more consistent schedule, better financial footing. She shows up reliably for her custody time, and Robert comes home from those weekends happy. Which is what genuinely matters. I do not wish her continued suffering. I simply do not think about her enough for it to matter either way. Derek Calloway, I understand, left his firm and relocated. The real estate market had not been kind to him, or he had not been kind to it. I learned this the same way I had learned everything else about him. Passively, without seeking it, from the natural circulation of information in a world where your actions follow you whether you want them to or not. The house has a vegetable garden now that Robert and I planted together in the early spring. Captain sits in the dirt beside us when we water it with an expression of absolute and unshakable solidarity. Claire is the kind of person who shows up on a random Thursday with takeout because she knows I've had a brutal week and who disagrees with me genuinely and openly and completely without games. She told me one night this past winter, quietly and without any fanfare, that she loved me. I told her I loved her too, because I did, and it was completely true, and the truth is not something I have ever been afraid of. I don't think about the zoo the way I used to. When I do, what I remember most is not the betrayal, not the blue dot, not the timestamp, not the cold thing that clicked off in my chest on that bench. What I remember is my son asleep on my shoulder with a stuffed penguin tucked under his arm, completely safe, completely trusting, completely mine. And I remember the decision I made in that exact moment on that bench, that I would be the kind of man that moment deserved. I kept that promise. That's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything.